we can buy back government debt at a discount, in other words, if interest rates go up and we can buy bonds back at a discount, if we are liquid enough as a country, we should do that. In other words, we can buy back debt at a discount. People said, I want to go and buy debt and default on debt. And I mean, these people are crazy. This is the United States government. First of all, you never have to default because you print the money. I hate to tell you, okay? So there's never a default.
$59,748 for every man, woman, and child in America, their share of the national debt. It's a $19 trillion pile of bills, debt that the GOP frontrunner Donald Trump says he could pay off in 8 short years. It's a magical mystery tour of math. Here's why that math doesn't add up. Eliminating the national debt in 8 years would mean first balancing the budget. You need Congress for that. Good luck. Then you'd have to pay down $2.3 trillion a year. The entire amount the government is spending this year, just less than $4 trillion. Trump claims he could do it by negotiating trade deals, something economists say could have disastrous consequences if it starts a trade war with countries like China and Mexico. Trade wars cause recessions, lost jobs, and higher deficits when tax revenue plunges. Complicating Trump's sensational claims, he wants to cut taxes for everyone. Now, that would lower the amount the government brings in, making the deficit surge. In fact, tax scorers say Donald Trump's tax plans would balloon the deficit and the national debt. How would the country pay for all that? More debt.
What do you think about Donald Trump's plan of cutting the debt by making bondholders of Treasury bonds take a hit?
Well, actually, that's not what he said. What he said, because he was talking about open market purchase. He was talking about doing a swap. So he's saying where debt is trading for a discount and you can swap. He's basically talking about re-engineering, but it's nothing that would default or be involuntary to a creditor. He's talking about where you can refund, defease, or make open market swaps and purchases. In fact, Donald Trump is exactly the person to figure out, because what we need is not a debt swap. We need a debt for equity swap. The whole planet needs a debt for equity swap. So rather than re-engineer the debt, what we need to do is re-engineer the relationship between debt and equity and go to a much more equity-based system.
So how could Donald Trump pay off the national debt in just 8 short years, as he promised to do during his interview with the Washington Post last Thursday? To understand how to make this dramatic change safely and effectively, first you have to understand what the national debt is. When Congress wants to spend more money than it has in income, that's called a budget deficit. So let's say that in 2015 the budget passed by Congress was $4 trillion. But the national income, the total revenue, was only $3.5 trillion. So that creates a $500 billion budget deficit. So where does the nation get the extra money? The Treasury has to borrow it. These various Treasury securities pile up the national debt. Here is our current national debt to the penny: $19,264,938,619,643.07 as of March 31st, last Tuesday. Hopefully your head is not spinning yet with all these numbers, but here is the last one. How much interest are we actually paying on all this borrowing? Well, it varies wildly from year to year, but here are the last 5 years. It has varied from about $360 billion to $454 billion. That's almost as much as we spend on the entire Department of Defense. It's as much as we currently spend on education, Medicare and health, veterans benefits, HUD, international affairs, energy and environment, science, Social Security, unemployment and labor, transportation, and food and agriculture. Since interest rates can't go any lower, it's fair to say that interest rates have to move higher at some point. And that means that the best case scenario for the future is that the national debt will double every 5 to 7 years, unless something is done. Obviously, this is not sustainable. There's only one way to tackle this problem. Get out of this debt money system, where banks create all the money in the system by having the outrageous privilege of lending money they do not have. It's not a new concept. To economic historians, it's known as a bank money system. Bank money systems tend to breed an oligarchy, as most of the big money is naturally sucked up by the banking system. The opposite of a bank money system is a state money system. State money is money created by the Treasury for the benefit of all citizens equally, not favoring one class, the banking class. Therefore, a state money system tends to reduce the amount of money the banking class accumulates and creates a more wealthy middle class because the politicians pay less attention to bankers and more attention to us, we the people. It's probably no surprise to you, but most people think that we already have a state money system, and they are horrified when they actually learn that banks create all of our money at interest. A state money system then sells the nation's money to the banking class to lend out to us. It doesn't kill the banks. It just creates real competition between them. President John Adams considered any private issue of money a monstrosity and a fraud on the public. He was right. In the mid-1930s, at the depths of the Great Depression, a group of American professors of economics tried to persuade President Franklin D. Roosevelt to adopt the state money system to get out of the Depression. Leading this group was Irving Fisher, Professor Emeritus of Economics at Yale University, one of the most respected economists in the world. As he put it in his classic little book, 100% Money and the Public Debt, published in 1936, nationalize money, but do not nationalize banking. In fact, the present demand to nationalize banking would fade away if only the control of money were recaptured by government. Almost all of our complicated banking laws could be repealed if we made this separation between money creation and money lending. The insurance of bank deposits would become unnecessary because there would be no reasons for runs on banks. So, how would we make the transition in today's world? It's really pretty simple. Remember how the debt is purchased by buying Treasury notes and bonds and other securities? As these securities come due, instead of Treasury repaying them with these Federal Reserve notes, simply pay them off with this older form of state money, old U.S. notes. U.S. notes have the red seal. Federal Reserve notes have a green seal. U.S. notes were legal tender in the United States from 1862 to 1994. That's 132 years. It's the longest-serving form of American money. Federal Reserve notes are part of the bank money system. U.S. notes are issued free of debt from the Treasury of the United States. Other than the color of the seal, they look exactly the same, but one increases the national debt, the other does not. The good news for incoming President Trump is that about 48% of the national debt is sold as Treasury bills or Treasury notes with a maturity of 3 years or less. What does that mean? It means that once you start repaying the Treasury bills and notes with U.S. notes instead of Federal Reserve notes, it immediately starts to reduce the national debt. It's not inflationary because you aren't increasing the money supply, because you're just replacing bank money with state money on a one-for-one basis. The total money supply remains the same. It remains stable. Therefore, the state money switchover will not cause inflation. So within 3 years, President Trump will have paid off about 50% of the national debt held by the public. Mr. Trump said he could pay off all of the publicly held national debt within 8 years, but that doesn't take into account the 10-year Treasury notes and 30-year Treasury bonds still floating around out there. However, just starting to reduce the debt starts reducing the wildly growing interest payments. It's real money the U.S. can put to good use elsewhere in the economy. Now, if President Trump can boost the U.S. economy in other ways, through better trade deals, etc., that will all add up to a dramatic increase in our GDP, and the first significant decrease in our national debt since President Andrew Jackson last paid off the national debt in 1836. And with all that new prosperity, perhaps President Trump could offer the holders of these long bonds a special deal, extra interest to retire them early so he could keep his promise to the American people.
If we can buy back government debt at a discount, in other words, if interest rates go up and we can buy bonds back at a discount, if we are liquid enough as a country, we should do that. In other words, we can buy back debt at a discount. People said, I want to go and buy debt and default on debt. And I mean, these people are crazy. This is the United States government. First of all, you never have to default because you print the money. I hate to tell you, okay? So there's never a default.
So what we need is not a debt swap. We need a debt for equity swap. The whole planet needs a debt for equity swap. So literally, so rather than re-engineer the debt, what we need to do is re-engineer the relationship between debt and equity and go to a much more equity-based system.
Is that crazy and reckless what he wants to do? In your opinion, now you've handled big money.
What he's talking about is the truth. In other words, we are in no risk of default because we can print money. If you could print, if you could denominate all the money you borrowed for your house or your credit card in currency that you could print off your printer, there's no risk of default. So rather than re-engineer the debt, what we need to do is re-engineer the relationship between debt and equity and go to a much more equity-based system.